The times ahead will be radically different from those that we've experienced in our lifetimes. Though similar to many times before, how do I know that? Because they always have been. Welcome back to our channel. Let's get on with the video. Over his roughly 50 years of global macroeconomic investing, Ray Dalio has learned the hard way that the most important events that surprised him did so because they never happened in his lifetime. These painful surprises led him to study the last 500 years of history for similar situations where he saw that they had indeed happened many times before, with the ends, ups and downs of the Dutch, British, and US empires. And even time they did, it was a sign of changing world order. This study taught him valuable lessons that he's going to pass along to us in a distilled form. You can find the comprehensive version of this book and principles for dealing with the changing world order. Let him begin with a story that brought him to this point about how he learned to anticipate the future by studying the past. In 1971, when he was a young clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the United States ran out of money and defaulted on its debts. That's right, the US ran out of money. How did this happen? Well, back then gold was the money used in transactions between countries. Paper money like the dollar was like checks in a checkbooks in that it had no value other than it could be exchanged for gold, which was the real money. At the time, United States was spending a lot more money than it was earning by writing a lot more of these paper money checks than it had gold in the bank to exchange for them. As people turned these checks into the bank, the gold money, the amount of gold in the US started to dwindle. It soon became obvious that the US couldn't keep its promises for all the exciting paper money, so people holding dollars rushed to exchange them before the gold ran out. Recognizing that the US was going to run out of real money, on Sunday evening, August 15th, President Nixon went on television to tell the world that the US was breaking its promise to let people exchange their dollars for gold. Of course, he didn't say it that way. He said it more diplomatically, without making it clear that the United States was defaulting. Quote, "The strength of the nation's currency is based on the strength that's nation's economy, and the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against these speculators. I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, expect in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States." Ray, quote, "I watched in awe, realizing that money as we understood it was ending. What a crisis. I expected the stock market to plunge the next day, so I got on the exchange floor early to prepare. When the opening bell rang, pandemonium broke out, but not the kind I expected. The market was up, way up, and went on to rise nearly 25%. That surprised him because he never experienced a currency devaluation before. When they dug into history, he discovered that the exact same thing happened in 1933 and had the exact same effect. Then paper dollars were also linked to gold, which the US was running out of because it was spending more paper money checks than it had gold to exchange for them. And President Roosevelt announced on the radio that he would break the country's promise to exchange dollars for gold. This leads to a surge in productivity and economic growth, which attracts investments and talents from around the world. As the country becomes more prosperous, it begins to expand its influence beyond its borders, seeking new markets and resources to sustain its growth. During this phase, the country also tends to establish its itself as a dominant military power, investing heavily in its armed forces and expanding its territorial holdings. It seeks to secure its borders and protect its interest, both at home and abroad. At this point, the country has become a rising power, a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. It has established itself as a leader in innovation, education, and military might, and has a strong, stable government that is supported by the majority of its citizens. The top. As the country continues to grow and expands, it reaches a point where it becomes the dominant power in the world. Its influence extends to every corner of the globe, and its currency becomes the standard for international trade. At this stage, the country is at the height of its power and prosperity. Its economy is booming, its military is unbeatable, and its people are enjoying unprecedented levels of wealth and stability. However, this is also the stage where the seeds of decline are sown. The wealth gap between the rich and the poor begins to widen, and the ruling elite become more disconnected from the needs and desires of the people. As the country becomes more powerful, it also becomes more arrogant and complacent. It assumes that its dominance is inevitable and eternal, and begins to neglect the very institutions and systems that made it great in the first place. This leads to a decline in productivity and innovation, and the country's leaders become more focused on maintaining their own power and privilege than on advancing the country's interest. Corruption and cronyism becomes more widespread, and the government becomes increasingly authoritarian and repressive. The decline. At this stage, the country's decline becomes more pronounced. Its economy stagnates, its military becomes weaker, and its people became more restless and discontented. As the government becomes more oppressive, opposition movements began to emerge, challenging the ruling elite and demanding change. This can take many forms, from peaceful protests to violent upsprings. In some cases, the ruling elite may respond to these challenges, but attempting to crack down on dissent, which only serves to further inflame public anger and untrust. Meanwhile, external challenges also begin to mount. Rival powers may seek to take advantage of the country's weakness, launching military or economic attacks to weaken its position. In some cases, the country may be forced to cede territory or resources to these rivals, further eroding its power and influence. Ultimately, the country's decline may end in collapse of revolution, as the ruling elite are overthrown and a new order is established. Conclusion. As we have seen, the rise and decline of empires is a natural recurring cycle in human history. While no two empires are exactly the same, they tend to follow similar patterns of growth, dominance, and decline. Understanding these patterns can help us anticipate the future of the world's major powers and prepare for the changes and challenges that lie ahead. By investing in education, innovation, and strong institutions, we can help to ensure that our own countries continue to rise and prosper, rather than fall into decline and decay. Thank you for watching. See you in our next video.